We now meet Paul Mulcahy of the Dwella Company of the Irish Volunteers.
Sole survivor of the 10 men that shot to with Pete at Ballyone House on the 8th of week 1916. When a dispatch rider arrived from Dublin, from GHQ Dublin, at Ballyone on 8th of Sunday morning, telling Pete that the rebellion was off. Pete at that time, he was a big man and a big farmer, and he had a 4-car. He had to take his 4-car and drive all over the south because he was officer commanding the whole south. And he had to drive all over the south and stop the rebellion. And when he came back on Monday evening, we were all there doing whatever he told us to do. And he said, "Lads," he said, "I will keep ye on. I might get more work."
Now, when you joined the Volunteers in 1914, how and why did you become involved?
Huh?
How and why did you become involved in the Volunteers in 1914?
Well, when the National Volunteers finished that time, Pete stood up the Sunday after and started the Republican Volunteers, and we all joined them up. Packy and myself joined up, and Joby was in it. And he surely got about 30 to join. He had a lot of his own men and all joined up. And listen, we carried on then from 14 to 16, and we had the great old Paddy Donnan of Garnmore. He was our trainer.
Now, when you joined in 1914, what age were you?
Well, what did I say now? In 14. Well,
you were at least 18 years of age.
I was, about 18
years of
yes,
age.
Because in 1920, I was surely 20 years of age.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, in those days in Dwella, during the Volunteers, 1914 to 1916, as a young man, what other involvement had you?
Well, and then I was the coach testing was that at that time, and there were a big family of us there, and I took it over. I was appointed by Mr. Soloheadbeg, and I took it over anyway, and I was in the coach testing association. That was, I think, about 1919, I think.
Yes.
That's that. And
what I meant to ask you, Paul, as well, you know, a young fellow of 18, in 1914 and 15 and 16, what was your social life like? What did you do of a Sunday night?
Oh, well, at that time, you know, there were to be dances in every school, and I was a good dancer and a step dancer, and I had a fine young life, going to dances every Sunday night. I put down a great young life at that time.
Now, when you were involved in the War of Independence, you had to forego your Sunday night dances.
We had. Oh, God, we had. Well, we'll say in 16 then, when 16 was over, we were left, we'll say, with the 10 men. 2 of them joined Sinn Féin, 2 of the oldest men. And my brother went away to a job. Jack Louie went back to Cloran Creamery, and we were left with 5 men then to carry on. And we said then, we turned around then, and we had to organise. And we organised. And in 1919, well, that was the election of Peter McCann, wasn't it?
Yes, December 1918.
Yeah. Well, at that election, with a great work we carried on in the water. Listen, we had 20 men ready, and we were at Luby's, the headquarters of the Sinn Féin in Cashel. And with 20 men, with bandolier and haversack. And we took over all the Poland boats in Cashel. And when the RICC is taken over, they left, and we took over for the day.
Outside the Poland boats?
Yes.
Now, Paul, I want to bring you back again to 1916, because after interviewing you here, we'll be inviting you out to hear you were involved as a young man over 60 years ago at McCann's in Ballyowen. In 1916, what actually happened in the Weller? You told us earlier about the courier coming down from GHQ, whom I understand was the son of Owen McNeil's. But also what I would like to know is what were you doing during that week in Ballyowen?
We were in Ballyowen. Some of us had to do guard. More of us had to look after the rifles and ammunition. And we were all doing something for the whole week. We'll say, even that Pierce was there on Monday. And before that, we'll say the Friday before Easter, Pierce came back from Dublin a Thursday evening, and he called a meeting for Friday, and for Friday, and nearly all turned up, and he looked for volunteers. There were a lot of his own men in, and what he said, I don't want married men, I don't want my own men, I don't want men outside, he said. But I want young men, he said, to volunteer, he said. So 10 of us volunteered. And after that, we carried on for the week. And when the week was over, he came out. I think it was a Friday evening. And he said to his 2 officers, Jack Luby was one of his lieutenants, and my brother Packy was the other lieutenant. And he said to Jack Luby, you take half the men now, he said, and you take the other half, Paddy, he said, and divide all the arms and ammunition, and take them away out of here, and bring them to a safer place, because we'll be ready.
Very good, Paul. In a few moments we'll visit Ballyowen House and we'll then discuss with you and Frank McCann Pierce McCann's capture, and we'll go on then to discuss with you, Paul, as captain of the Weller Company, your involvement in the War of Independence, which was indeed quite a prominent one, because as I understand it, you are now the lone survivor in the Weller Company of, number one, the people who joined the volunteers in 1914, of the people involved in the 1916 in Ballyowen House. And indeed, you're one of a small group surviving who were involved in the War of Independence. We hope to visit briefly Newtown, Ambush Site, Ballyowen House, and possibly Meldrum Hall, where the great IRA convention was held, which was responsible for forming the Brigade areas in this division. Also, Paul, you had the privilege in your time of being at the 1917 Sinn Féin Ardèche, at which Eamon de Valera replaced Arthur Griffith as president, and also as a bonus on that occasion you saw Tipperary playing Dublin in that famous All-Ireland in which your neighbours Borlahan were involved and were defeated by Dublin. So we'll move on out to the scene of the many actions that you were involved in during that time.
morning and welcome.
Frank,
How
thank
are
you
you?
very much indeed.
Hello, Paul. Welcome again. Yes, glad to meet you.
Yes.
Frank, we're here at Ballyown House indeed, a very historic house and a very historic place, particularly insofar as it relates to the War of Independence, indeed in 1916. As nephew of the late Pierce McCann, who was one of the guiding lights in the Irish Volunteers, indeed in the Gaelic League and in Sinn Féin from a very early time, we thought it was only right and fitting doing anything in relation to the events of that time that we should visit Ballyown House. We're delighted to have this opportunity of talking to you, and the purpose of our visit by and large here is to ask you some questions in relation to, as chairman of the 3rd Tipperary Brigade Old IRA Commemoration Committee, I am indeed aware of how interested you yourselves are in the events of that time. So I would just briefly like to ask you here, and also to ask our good friend Paul, who was captain of the volunteers here after 1916, to fill us in on the events of that time. We know indeed your uncle from a very early age was involved in the movement, being one of coming from a social background that at that stage very few from that particular aspect of life were so prominently involved at such an early stage. Possibly you would fill us in on the early years of your late uncle, Pierce McCann.
Yes, well now, in a dual capacity as the present owner of Ballyown and as chairman of the Old IRA 3rd Tipperary Brigade Commemoration Committee, I welcome you both, and of course in particular Paul, who has many, many memories with this actual place and with, of course, with my late uncle. Like you, Sean, and Paul, those of us in the Old Tipperary Brigade, in the committee, we are anxious to preserve for future generations the events and the stories of these events that took place from 1916 onwards. And we're anxious to have a visual record if possible. So on that occasion I think it's very important that we are beginning here today, and I thank you for what the remarks you said about my uncle. It is surprising, I suppose, that someone of his social standing and the class in which he was born became so prominent. He wasn't alone in that, of course. There were a good number of others like him. People ask, why did he do it? Well, I can only give you the answer of what his own brother said to me. He was born with an enormous love for Ireland. And as he grew, this love for Ireland grew with him. And I think you could say that he also developed a tremendous love for its heritage, particularly its language. And from an early age, again, he became very interested in the learning of Irish. And he became proficient as the years went on by going to the Gaeltachts in Kerry and in Galway. Well now, I think you could say, from a very early age, as I say, he was very, very interested in all things Irish. And briefly to recount about his early years, well, he was educated in the Christian Brothers Cashel and subsequently in Clongowes. And he was twice awarded medals or parchments for bravery, on both occasions connected with drowning incidents. At the early age of 17, he got the bronze medal of the Royal Humane Society for attempting to rescue a young boy in Tramore. And 8 years later, in the middle of winter, he plunged into the River Suir at Clune near Goose Cross and attempted to save the chief whip of the Tipperary hunt, who had crossed the river and who had floundered. He failed in that attempt, but did succeed in rescuing another man who was in the river as well, a Major Lewis. For that he received the parchment of the Royal Humane Society. That was when he was then aged about 25 or so. He was, as he became interested in Irish and the teaching of Irish, which he developed insofar that he taught just half a mile down here in the house then owned by Owen Keevan. He began to teach Irish lessons to the local people. And from there he became into the Gaelic League. And I would say from there he became interested and joined the Irish Volunteers. And became recognised, I think, throughout the Gaelic League and the Irish Volunteers as a man of outstanding qualities. So when it came to 1916, it's very relevant to refer to the presence here of Paul Mulcahy, because he is now the sole survivor of those gallant men who actually guarded my uncle and this place during that critical time. Pearse and Paul and others throughout the country had been training up to 1916. But the arms they had at that stage were very much limited. But he was not a member at that stage, or at any stage, in fact, of the IRB. And as such, he may not have been fully aware of when the insurrection was going to start, which knowledge was in the hands of really comparatively few people. However, it was generally acknowledged that there was going to be some form of insurrection. And as such, he was prepared, and Paul and the other members of the company were prepared. However, on that Easter Saturday, countermanding order came from Owen MacNeil, and his nephew Brian came here to countermand any order leading to an insurrection.
Just for accuracy purposes, it would have been his son.
Oh, his son, I beg your pardon, his son, yeah, sorry, his son Brian. So Pearse McCann then had to set out for Munster, the rest of Munster, and to give this countermanding order to the various people who were actively concerned. At this stage, he was county commandant for all Tipperary. After the rebellion, he was arrested and served with others in Irish and English prisons. After 3 months, he was released. And he immediately came back here and started to reorganize the Sinn Féin clubs, which had more or less become disorganized after the arrest of all these local leaders. And during that time we had by-elections, of course. We had the Clare by-election, and he actively took part in that and in other by-elections. On one occasion he was with Robert Barton. I think it was a by-election in the Louth or Meath. I'm not definite, maybe Sean would fill me in, but he actively was with Barton, and although they had never met before, they got on very well. And Barton's remark afterwards, when he was asked to write about Pearse, was, well, he said, I soon found that whatever Pearse McCann said he would do, and in fact he did it better than most. However, that brings us on to 1917, and at that stage they were definitely, Pearse and the others were actively reorganizing. And we then had the time of his arrest, and that was occasioned by the so-called German plot.
If I could just come in, Frank, during 1917, of course, one of the major events that changed more or less the policy of Sinn Féin occurred, in which your late uncle was involved, and indeed that was the 1917 Sinn Féin Ardèche in Dublin, at which Arthur Griffith was replaced by Eamon de Valera as president of Sinn Féin, and the two people to represent the Duala Sinn Féin Common was your uncle Pearse and Paul Mulcahy. Also, that Sinn Féin Ardèche in October of that year coincided with the 1917 All-Ireland hurling final, in which Paul and Pearse's neighbours would have been playing down the road for Lahan, which Dublin actually defeated them in that game. Also, at the same time, in Dublin, imprisoned at that stage, was Sean Tracy of Soloheadbeg a few years later. I understand, Paul, you were at that Sinn Féin Ardèche, You were at the All-Ireland hurling final,
Yes.
and you visited Sean Tracy in prison.
Yes, I visited with a great man, Larry Power, holding a gun. And he got the 2 passes for it, and we went to Mount Jay, and the water brought us up along, and the little square hole in the wall. He wouldn't open the door and let him out. He had to put out that finger and shake hands or he's out to the little hole in the wall.
No, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
Now, where did you stay in Dublin?
We stayed opposite in the High Burnham Hotel. There were surely 10 Tipperary fellas staying there.
That was in Dawson Street, opposite the Hibernian, near the mansion house.
I think to the High Burnham Hotel.
Yes,
It was
yes.
right opposite the mansion house.
Yeah, it was near the yes.
Yeah.
What are what is the most outstanding memory in your mind today of that Sinn Féin Or Day?
Well, the greatest memory I have is the memory of the great Larry Power getting the tickets and bringing it to Mount Joy. We attended the convention for the whole week, and it finished a Friday. He got the tickets and we went to Mount Joy a Saturday.
Just to divert a moment, have you any memories of that hurling game in 1917?
Well, I remember Tommy Shanley Kilcarney being on, and I remember that Arthur Donnelly down there, he had a broken leg at the very same time. And when the ball came up one time, listen, Skinny Marr failed to stop it. Out 20 yards from the goal. And listen, Jack Doherty was on the back, and Jack Doherty left in 6 cuts. Jack Doherty left the back and went down the field. And they played Dublin for the last quarter of an hour, and they couldn't score, and the goalkeeper that was there. Yeah.
That was Arthur Donnelly.
No, the Dublin goalkeeper.
Oh, Tommy Daly, Tommy Daly.
Yeah,
but
he was a smashing man, he was.
Again, it's just to emphasise the closeness between the national games and the Sinn Féin movement of that time. To come back again to Pearse McCann, Frank, indeed the events of 1917 and his arrest in May of 1918, which I understand took place here at Ballyown House, or in the grounds of Ballyown. But before we depart from 1916, it is the 2 top rooms here in the corner of Ballyown House.
Up there we slept.
Where the 10 men who stood by in Garb at Ballyown,
Yeah.
it was their sleeping accommodation during that week. Quite almost 200 years at that stage. And today, thank God, it is in a good state of preservation thanks to Frank here. And it indeed reminds us of many events in past history going back 300 and 400 years ago. But to come back to the events of 6 years ago, in which we have the living link with us here, in May of 1918, I understand Pearse McCann was arrested here, arrested by a local RIC man. You may fill us in on the details of that arrest and attempted escape.
In 1918, now, on the 18th of May of 1917, I beg your pardon, 1918, at 5 a.m. in the morning, Pearse and the rest, his father and mother, were awoken by commotion here in the front of this very house. And when his mother looked out, she saw here the RIC from Cashel with soldiers. And she rushed to Pearse's room, and to find him already dressed. He knew that he had been warned, and he knew that he was going to be arrested for the second time. So his mother and his father proceeded downstairs, and in that time they delayed as long as possible to enable Pearse to escape through the back of this house. And he got out through a dairy window, and up along the back, and through a garden, a walled-in garden, You can see the actual wall, part of the wall from here. And he escaped over the wall and into a wood which is at the rear of that walled-in garden. And there's a very large skeoch or whitethorn tree. And into that he got. He had left. They immediately fanned out and proceeded up into the wood as the most likely spot where he could have gone to. It's interesting to note that even at this stage in 1918, there were army spotter planes here at that very time. Well, he stayed up in this tree, and the searchers went up after him. And it is a rather sad thing to relate that he was fairly safe apparently for some time until one of the searchers sprained his foot and sat down under the very tree. And a twig broke. And he looked up and he saw Pierce McCann. And Pierce said to him, "If you're an Irishman, you'll give me a chance." But it was not to be, and the whistle was blown. And Pierce was captured and brought down back here to the house where he was permitted to dress properly. And at that time, he told his mother what had happened. And he was then brought away with many others, similarly taken under this infamous German plot, and finally transported to England. Now, Pierce had been a tremendously active man all his life. He was of tremendous physical strength. I've referred earlier to the question about him being able to swim and being even able to save people from a swollen river like the River Suir was. He was also a gifted horseman. In fact, one horse he had, which was to have been riding on Easter Monday of 1916, was called Sinn Féin. But now, there was in England at this stage, immediately after the war ended in November of 1918, this illness called the black flu or influenza was really sweeping England, and in particular certain prisons. Naturally, they were it was in certain places like prisons that this flu would take its greatest toll. Well, Pierce, as I said, was perhaps more prone to be a victim to this because of his open air life all the time. However, before that took place, or at about the time of that thing, it was in December of 1918 that we had the elections to our first Dáil, and Pierce was elected for Tipperary East. So the black flu intervened, as it was called, and in May, in March, Pierce contracted this black flu. And at first he wasn't considered to be seriously ill, but subsequently it became much worse. And he died from pneumonia brought on by this influenza in the 6th of March 1919. Immediately the rest of the prisoners who were held under the German plot were released, and most of them accompanied the body of Pierce McCann back to Ireland.
The occasion of his funeral to the Wella is indeed one of the great folklore tales of Tipperary. It was, as most Republican funerals of that time, were very large. Indeed, people claim it was so large that the first of the funeral had reached the Wella when it yet hadn't left Thurles. Among the people who carried Pierce McCann's coffin to the grave side in the Wella was Paul Mulcahy, who was with us. The man who delivered the oration at the grave on that March day in 1919 was Cahill Brew, who indeed was to die tragically afterwards himself in the Civil War. And many of the people who became the top people in this country afterwards were present at the funeral, including the late W.T. Cosgrave. Paul, what is your memory of that great occasion, that very sad occasion, but very solemn occasion in the Wella on that March day in 1919, when, with the other members of the Dwella company of volunteers, you carried the coffin to the graveside and laid it to rest.
Well, in the Dwella that day, the crowd was so big and so large. We had the whole company across and a lot more from the battalion across the whole place there in the Dwella at the grave where they cut up. And they had to so mighty the crowd. They had to go up and knock above a thin. They had to knock that brace of a wall, even to let him in and let him out. And could I tell about Jack Ward?
Do you?
The 6 men of us that brought in the great Master Pierce and laid him down at the side of the grave. And Jack Ward, Garen Moore, was one of the volunteers at that time. And when he left down the coffin, the 2 buttons went out of his breeches there. And he had to hold up the breeches while Carbow was giving the oration.
Well, yes indeed, Paul, that was, I suppose, one incident that has stuck in your mind very clearly of it.
Yeah.
Can you remember Cathal Bruce speaking?
Well, I do, but I can't remember anything he said.
Yes.
No, I can't.
But I believe the sad event of Pierce McCann's death, and we take a look again at Ballyown House, and indeed the many stories it could tell if it could only speak. The many famous people who came here in those years. People like the late Ernest Blythe, Colin O'Loughlin, and others I'm sure that you can recall.
Yes, I do. I remember all them. And I remember some fights we had and everything else. And to watch the men from Turles up on trees down there in that side of the country where one day, and to watch there with Turles men and a lot of men from around the whole country. We had a good company at that time here under the great Pierce.
But of course, one of the greatest tributes I think that can be paid to Pierce McCann was the fact that he died in 1919. The work that he done and done so very well was carried on by those he left after him. And the Dwella company of the old IRA was one of the most active in Tipperary in the years that followed, the years of the War of Independence. And for a small parish with around that time a population of possibly 500 people, it offered more to Ireland than any other area of comparable size and population during that time. And 5 of its greatest sons lie buried up in the little graveyard here. Pierce McCann was the first indeed to offer his life for Ireland, and he was followed by the Luby brothers and Bill Delaney. A story that still to this day brings tears to the people of the Dwella when it's recalled. The Luby brothers on Christmas week 1920 both died within a day of each other. Jim Luby and Bill Delaney were shot by British forces at Kilfeacle while prisoners, and the following night, the Sunday night, Larry Luby was killed over at Ballysheene on the main Dublin road. All of those people were comrades of yours, Paul, and indeed another great IRA man who had many connections with the Dwella, whose family lived here for many years, but who was born in County Clare, was Commandant Paddy Hogan, who on the 2nd anniversary of Pierce McCann's death, 6th of March 1921, after in a hectic gunfight with the British Army at Derryclooney, Clare, was killed, and he also is buried in the Dwella. You, I'm sure, were present at all of those funerals, Paul.
Yes. Well, I was present at the great Commandant Paddy Hogan and the 2 Lubies and Bill Delaney.
they were volunteers in your company at the time you were captain.
They were all volunteers. They were.
Jim Luby, for example, can you remember or recall for us Jim Luby and his involvement? I believe he was a fluent speaker of Irish and very involved in the Gaelic League and Sinn Féin.
Well, at the first election that was carried out at the company, it was held above a Dunphy's cover. And I remember that we had a good company there the very same day. And I travelled up, I met Jack Luby and I travelled up to the company. And Paddy Hogan was there and he carried out the election. And I was elected captain. And Jim Luby was elected first lieutenant. And Paddy Nowler was elected second lieutenant.
Oh, just a moment. When you talk about Dunphy's cover, you mean now a cover up in Kill Hills, do you?
No, back here, up this way.
Up
at Garramore.
On Garramore side.
In from Garramore.
Yeah, that's up in the hills behind Duella.
Yeah. Well, I can't think now from that.
Well, Paul, yes, indeed, it's a long time ago, but Jim Luby and Larry Luby and Bill Delaney and Paddy Hogan were all very close friends of yours, of course.
They were.
You know them.
They were.
Bill Delaney, I understand, was the local blacksmith here.
Yes, Bill Delaney was the local blacksmith there in the fort owned by Pat Malumbi. And in 1988, he made the pikes to fight conscription. And they were every rake of sweep rake in the country was raided and the teeth taken out of and brought all the smith. But Bill Delaney shone out and the pikes that he made. And they were meeting in Owen Keevan's house there and the great Pierce was at it. And he let them. And they said, one man said, there should be a groove down in the pike, the way that it should be easy to pull it back. And Tommy Shannon was there. Drive it far enough, said Shannon, until it be easy pull it back.
You didn't forget that.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the great things that Bill Delaney that done. He was a great man and a smashing smith.
Speaking of Bill Delaney, Paul, and speaking of Pat Malumbi, reminds me of a rhyme that the late Dennis Malumbi sent back in letter form to an uncle of yours, expressing some judgment on the earlier national volunteers that were formed in the Welland.
Yeah.
Can you remember that he wrote to your brother Tommy from Dublin?
I don't only be able to think of it. I say it anyway. Just a line to you, Tommy, to tell you some news. But my poetic fancy, I know you'll excuse. Though short was your letter, it brought back old times, and I felt by reply with a few little rhymes. I was glad to get the news of the old place, and to know that the Walla was keeping the pace, and all the old neighbours that's happy and free, that was never downhearted in the Walla McCree.
Now, you had something about the volunteers. I hear that a volunteer army you've got.
Yeah, I hear that a volunteer army you've got of 200 brave soldiers that near fire the church, and to march upon Ulster ye intend to do soon, and wipe out Edward Carton that aren't but so.
That's just a typical example of the wit of the people of the Wella as well at that time, because the volunteers referred to in that were the national volunteers before the split developed at the outbreak of the World War, when the Wella had quite a strong company. But when the volunteers split in the Wella, quite a number of people from the area, for domestic reasons as well as anything else, joined the British Army at that time, and which Paul referred to earlier, Pierce McCann at the meeting after the famous split, after John Redmond's speech, in which he called for support for the British Army. John Redmond, of course, was the leader of the Old Irish Party at that time, and was indeed for many years. But people like Pearse McCann felt that if there was a war to be fought and Irish people were to be involved in it, that war should have been for the freedom of their country. And Pearse McCann made that clear at a volunteer meeting here in 1914, and as a result there was a split in the volunteer movement here. But the vast majority of people remained loyal to Pearse McCann at that time, Paul Mulcahy being one of them here with us today. But seeing that we have covered quite well the events leading up to Pearse McCann's death, and indeed the events immediately afterwards, there were indeed other events in different parts of this parish that occurred during that time that we may have a brief look at. Indeed, the Newtown ambush, which took place on the 2nd of July 1920, which took place between the Walla and Ballinure, and we may have a quick shot of the scene of that just later on. Also, indeed, we had the famous convention at Meldrum Hall, in which IRA convention, in which volunteers and prominent IRA people from all over Tipperary assembled, and their safety was the responsibility of the local company of the Dwala Volunteers. The organisation and the security provided at that time by the local company here was indeed a talking point, and was offered as an example of what a good company should be by such people as Sean Tracy and Seamus Robinson later on, as similar meetings were held. Rarely were so many of the top brass of the IRA under the one roof, and if the British had been successful in making a swoop on Meldrum Hall, it is quite possible that the contribution South Tipperary would have made in the War of Independence would have been a much lesser one than that which we are now all so proud of. But I feel that at this stage we shall break, and we will visit the spot in the Walla where the cemetery where the people whom we spoke of are laid to rest, where Cal Brew delivered his oration, and then we'll go on to Newtown. Paul and Frank were here now at Meldrum Hall, where the famous IRA convention was held in 1919, a convention that you were at, Paul. Indeed, as we were looking earlier, Meldrum Hall is the oldest known stone building with a slate roof in Tipperary, in mid-Tipperary, and it was a very historic place and a very secluded place to hold the convention. Paul, can you recall briefly for us your memory of that famous convention in 1919?
At two brigade meetings, they couldn't find a place in South Tipperary safe enough to hold the convention. And Commandant Paddy Hogan came back after the 6th Brigade meeting to me, and he said, he told me all about the meeting, and that they couldn't find a place to hold it. And he asked me, could you find a place? I could, I said. Meldrum House is empty, and we'll hold it in Meldrum House. So they agreed on that day and at that time, and it had to be kept all sacred, because everything was sacred. We couldn't be let no one. Every man was bound to secrecy. And the night of that was held, it was held on a Sunday night, and they had a line from Limerick coming down and in the Shambhala Road and out Abbey Road and in there at the back and coming into the yard there. Another line from below Carrick up along, and they came by Mucras Hill and they came in there and up this way. And
when you're speaking of a line, Paul, what do you mean by a line?
They couldn't bring it by barracks or anything. They had to bring it, we'll say, a line that wouldn't be touching barracks or anything else. Because
a road,
yes. Well, it's supposed to be at 8 o'clock. Well, Well, they started off anyway, I don't know what time they started, but they had to come on bicycles and ponies and cars and all like that. There were no motors there at that time. And the password was Grogan, and there were 2 volunteers at every cross. And when they came up to that, they said Grogan, and they were pointed on the road, the same way as this road, until they all dribbled into Meldrum House, that way and this way, and they filled the ballroom. The meeting started sharply, and it kept on until 4 or 5 in the morning and finished up. The coming on of the Walla and Catcher had kettles and tip, and they gave them tea and sang with the tanny man. They all tackled up again, dribbled out, and all went back safe. That's about
very interesting. Yes, no doubt.
Speaking of coming on, actually, it is the first time we have mentioned them, and the ladies played a major role in the War of Independence, indeed in many respects. Now, how active was coming on in the Walla in those days?
There wasn't much of them at all. They weren't so active at all, because there were many. There were only 3 that I say. Nellie Loby, Nellie Ryan, she's Mrs. O'Brien now, and Nellie Loby went to California and got married, and she's dead. And my sister that lives beyond there. They are the wife of Professor Seamus O'Neill, Miss Nevin, and another person from Cashel that I can't remember. And they acted out here in the front, and they gave tea to anyone and sandwiches in the morning when the convention was over.
Oh, but you mentioned again, it's of interest, some of the people who were at that convention.
They were all officers of the South Tipperary Brigade. Sean Tracy, Dan Breen, and Sean Fitzpatrick. I didn't know a lot of them at all that time, but I knew all them. And that's about, and there were delegates sent from every company.
I understand.
Yes.
And the Brigade meeting, of course, would have taken place after, much later than the Soloheadbeg ambush and other events which had occurred. And most of those people, like Sean Tracy and Dan Breed and Sean Hogan, who were present here, were very wanted people by the police at that stage. And the War of Independence was just about reaching the explosive stage at that period in time. So when we again look at Meldrum Hall, look at its location here among the hills of the Walla, it was indeed a carefully selected place, and a very good place from a point of view of security. But the Dawala Company, I think, and indeed Paul, you on many occasions have expressed pride at the fact that you are the company choosing to hold this where others failed and did it successfully. What do you attribute the success of it to? The success of the convention in the sense that the security forces of the British Crown at that stage did not apprehend you.
Well, I'll say there's one thing certain to be said about it, that the secrecy was kept so much that no one ever spoke, and that the rights here anyone else never got it. And even the people and neighbours around here, it's all they could see in a few days after they were burying someone in Brigade.
Well, I think that more or less sums it up, and I would like to avail of this opportunity to thank the Walsh family for providing us with this opportunity of filming their house. And indeed, it's a very historic house and very much a part of our history and our heritage in the Walla.
Yes, indeed.
In the ballroom in Meldrum Hall, where the officers of the South 3rd Tipperary Brigade met, Paul Mulcahy, who was present at that meeting, is now actually sitting in the same area of the room where Sean Tracy, Dan Breen, Sean Hogan, Seamus Robinson and Seamus O'Neill sat at where the table was, and Paul was then, as the captain of the company, sitting down the floor here. So indeed, we're going back 64 years in time, and Paul is sitting now where he looked up and saw those great men sitting in 1919. Newtown Cross, the site of an ambush that took place here on the evening of the 2nd of July 1920, when a number of RIC men who were returning from Cashel after collecting their pay to Ballinure were ambushed here at exactly on this site where we are standing. A number of volunteers under Commandant Tommy Donovan selected this position for obvious reasons, that the RIC would come into the area on bicycles without noticing anybody, and from the Cashel area their view would not be very clear. We are here again at Newtown Cross, the site of the famous ambush on the 2nd of July 1920. 6 members of the Irish Republican Army participated in the campaign in that ambush. Today, the only survivor, 64 years afterwards, is Paul Mulcahy, who was then the captain of the Dwella Company of the old IRA. Paul, 64 years is a long time. It was the first engagement under which you came under fire. Can you recall for us the events of that July day 64 years ago?
I can. Commandant Tommy Donovan called to me in the morning, and I was only about a fortnight back from Wormwood Shrubs at that time, and he called for me in the morning anyway, and he went down. We went down to the valley there and down the little Connolly's Avenue, and we met there Mikey Burke, Sean Wells, Sean Hayes and Joe Orman. And I asked Tommy, are you going to go with the 6th? And he said he was. And he said, you're making a mistake. There might be 10 or 12 of them in it, and we'll be bit. And I can get you 10 of them in about an hour. So he said no. He said we won't need them, he said, because he said they're not that much at all. They'll come up, he said, we have to tell them, put them with their hands, and that's all we have to do, he said. So we proceeded on here to Newtown Cross, and we got into position, and I was there in the corner of that ditch. Donovan and Burke was inside that little wall there, and Sean Hayes was there below. Sean Welch was there with him. Sean Hayes was here, and Joe Orman inside that. And we were waiting all day, and it was evening when they turned up. And poor Donovan and Burke, inside that little wall there, they were asleep. But wherever I raised my eyes there, and the first 10 was landed there, and I let one roar out of my body, and I shook the tube, and they leapt out. And they leapt out there in the road. And the sergeant and 2 more is coming up, and they let fly at them. And the 2 lads fired at them down the road there. And it held for about 10 minutes. So he came back then and he disarmed the guard at the 10 here. And he took me off around. And we were below my brother's house anyway. We were after crossing the road when one of them came back flying, and that was Brady. And he was just passing the road anyway, and we were able to fall in over the wall. We thought they were all coming and fired at him. But Donovan fired at him anyway, and he wounded him. And who turned up at them that very instant was Paddy Loughlin and Joe Neal. And he gave Joe Neal a revolver, and he said, follow him, he said. He'll fall, he said, and shoot him, he said. So Neil took the revolver and Loughlin, and they followed the 10. And where he fell was above it, near Dunphy's public house. and he was surrounded by women when the two lads arrived, and they could do nothing. That ended our ambush there.
The wounded RIC man whom you refer to was a Constable Brady, who lived for many years afterwards in Clonmel. He actually owned a public house in Clonmel.
Yes.
Did you ever meet him after the ambush?
No, I didn't ever meet him. No.
Now, when the ambush took place here, Paul, and you had the 10 captured here, what actually happened to him? What did you do with him?
Oh, when he was disarmed, Donovan wanted to shoot him, and the rest of the lads intervened, and they asked me to intervene with Tommy Donovan, and I intervened on Tommy Donovan there, and I said, Tommy, if you do that, says I, you're making the biggest mistake you ever made in your whole life, because none of them will ever surrender after that if you shoot him. You can do whatever you like now, sir.
Yes.
All right, he said, I won't do it. No, he didn't.
What did you actually do after the ambush, and the rest of you people, when the ambush was over?
We retreated back to the Walla, and they had bicycles and everything there, and they took on over to their own. They were from the 7th Battalion, and they took over to Mrs. Kennedy and McGorman back there, wherever they put up there.
Well, what actually route did you take? Did you go by road, or did you go across the fields?
Oh, we went to go across the field, all across the field, yes. And we got out in when we got out in the Walla anyway, Paddy Loughlin came back and he met me, and Paddy Loughlin came with me that night, and where we put up was above Tommy Ryan's at the hill, at the fire.
Yes.
Yes, that's where we put up.
And are there any friends of the relatives of the Ryans still around?
No, they're all dead.
You went on the run then?
Yes.
Permanently?
Yes.
How did you spend the rest of your time in the month of July? That was early July, can you recall?
Oh, I spent it with, we had a lot of work to do about old dumps and looking after arms and all that, and doing all volunteer work. I put down my time like that. Sometimes you'd be class knocked out in the day when you'd have no one. But some of the lads used to always come to me until we joined up in the next September and with the 2nd Battalion.
What was life in the Walla like in July 1920?
By God, you couldn't ask a better place than the Walla in them years. We used to have dances, singing songs, music, and everything else from one house to another, and we put down a very happy time.
Were ye aware, before you left the ambush site, that Sergeant Tobin of Ballinewer, which is only a mile back the road here, was shot dead?
Huh?
Were you aware that Sergeant Tobin, was killed in the ambush?
I wasn't. I didn't know were there anyone killed, but when apparently knew he was well wounded there. He ran in at the back of an old dump was there below, and I didn't ever see him after. Yes. And I didn't even know who was killed.
Yes.
No.
And in the excitement, immediately after the ambush, I understand what happened is you were expecting 6 or 8 people, policemen cycling together in a bunch, but they were extended over a wide distance.
They were extended back to come. Yeah. Extended back all the road there for nearly a mile. If they all come together, we had a better chance. But we'd had no chance the way they were. And then we couldn't go because when myself and Donovan went there, they were firing at us. We come around there, they fired at us, and we were going down that way, up the ditch. They were all down along the ditch. So we couldn't get them.
When you came into the Walla, was Brady removed out of the Walla at that stage? The wounded constable?
Well, we didn't go into that side of the well at all. We went here to Gleason side of the well.
Oh, yes. You didn't go to Dunphy at all?
No, no.
What was the reaction in the Wella immediately after the ambush by people?
Well, I couldn't tell you that because I wasn't in the Wella, because I lifted as quick as I could. I had to only fly up to my own house and get prepared. I knew I had to go out in the run in the minute.
Yes.
Yes, so I didn't come back at all. I went up at Paddy Loughlin and we knocked her, we kept to ourselves along from the Walla, and we got up to Tommy Ryan's at the hill.
Did you take one of the policemen's bicycles? Did you take some of the policemen's bicycles with you?
No.
You didn't take the bicycle?
I didn't see him anyway, no.
What was the intention of the ambush?
Well, that's the thing now I couldn't explain, because we'd say Tommy Donovan is the man that could answer that, or Mick Burke, but I'm not able to answer that. I don't know.
Tom Donovan, of course, was killed in action the following November in Killinall.
He was.
You knew Tom Donovan well?
I did. He was in Cork jail with me. Tommy Donovan was in Cork jail with me. And in Cork jail at that time, there were Sean Downey and 9 or 10 golden fellas. And I knew a good lot in Cork jail. I wasn't so long in Cork jail, but the first morning I woke in Cork jail, I got up on the old pipe and looked out the window, so the windows is all broke. And outside over 2 walls, there were a ring of men going around like that with 2 walls. And I looked, the first man I spied was Sean Downey. And I shouted out, "That's the right place to have you, Downey." "Oh, God, Mulcahy," he said, "did he get you?"
Yes. You were a prisoner as well. Now, there was a second ambush here at Newtown Cross.
Yes, they were.
Were you involved in that?
No, I wasn't involved in that at all. No, I had nothing to do with that at all. I was even away in Armagh or further up during that very day.
Yes.
I was sent on a business up that country. And something, I can't tell you what it was now, but I was sent to Paddy Hogan there.
Yes.
Yes.
But an ambush took place. Can you remember exactly what happened on the second ambush?
Well, what I was told that happened, they were in ambush here on the cross, and they were here for a long time, near evening. And whatever happened, whether the police got a tip off, the police didn't come the road at all, but they came the Mosspat. That was the Mosspat.
Yes.
And when they came there just to the thing, the lads had left their position, they were out there on the road, and they opened fire on the lads on the road. And they were a running fight across the country there, Brigade, with the volunteer and the sun.
Yes. Nobody was wounded?
Well, no, they didn't get anything.
I see.
Yes.
Well, of course, Newtown ambush, more or less, was the first real incident into the Wella Company area.
It was, as far as I know now.
What effect had it on the company as such?
Oh, it had a good effect on the company, and they were delighted. They were delighted with it, and Jim Lobey and all them, they even scalded that Donovan didn't let me go and take 9 or 10 of them.
Do you believe if you had been allowed to get the 9 or 10 of them, that you would have had a different result?
We'd have the whole ambush if I did.
Yes.
Yes, because we'd be able to do the road down just to Tommy within 10 minutes. And then we'd have got all of them. They couldn't go into the ditch because there were men to be inside it. Yes. And they were lost to us. Even that Neil and Paddy Loughlin didn't turn up in time. If they turned up in time, we were all right because we could give them a few arrows and they'd help us there. They didn't.
They also knew of the ambush, or was it just by accident they came along?
No, Paddy Loughlin knew about it, and Sean Hayes, Donovan sent Sean Hayes to catch it, and to look after, to know where the police was, and to find out something about it. But Sean Hayes met Paddy Loughlin in Cashel, and whatever chat they had, he told Paddy Loughlin. So Hayes left then and came back here, and he gave whatever news he had to Tommy Donovan. And when the Brahmas was just over, when we were turning around, we went down, we were crossing the road at Tommy. That's the time Neil and Paddy Loughlin was coming.
Oh, I see. Now, Joe Nagle, of course, lived in Ballyshean and was a member of the Borlahan Company. He was also a famous Tipperary hurler.
He was.
Did you know Joe Nagle well?
I knew him well. I did. And Paddy Loughlin was from Gardenmore, and he was a member of our company in the Walla D Company, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Tipperary Brigade.
So,
Paddy had one day we met beyond that at Ryan's beyond in Mayfield, Dr. Ryan's place, and there were 9 or 10, well there were 9 or 10, there were 6 or 7 of us there, and Paddy Loughlin was there, and they were after getting 6 new rifles from the brigade, and he had Paddy Hogan heard noise, and he said, load the magazines of them rifles. He said, for fear there be someone coming. So we loaded the 6 magazines anyway, and shoved them up into the rifles. And after that, a while, Paddy Hogan began to teach us, so I knew how to port arms for inspection. And we were in a line across that in a little shed. And when he gave the order anyway, and then after that, he took up a rifle, and there were no cut off in the magazine, and he didn't know that. And the very minute the thing was over, he said, when you pull the bolt up and down like that, he said, and pull it off. And he pulled it off. And it struck Paddy Loughlin there in the front of the hair, and went along on top of his head and out in the back. And it struck a limestone in the back, and it shattered me. I was next to it. It shattered me down along there and the whole arm, and the blood was running out my arm, and they all ran over to me. Oh, says I'm wounded at all, says Paddy Loughlin. He ran over to the window, he put up his hands away to his head, and you couldn't see where the bullets went in, but you could see a little where they came out.
Yeah.
And that was one of the escapes that Paddy Loughlin had. And even he was quartermaster in the 2nd Battalion. And after that, he was sleeping just sometime before the truce, over in Ballyballoo someplace, and he coming back, I suppose, to get a change of clothes. And wasn't he captured there, and wasn't he sentenced to death, and the truce saved him. He had 2 escapes from death.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Paul, I think we have covered Newtown Cross Ambush fairly well, and indeed covered some of the characters involved in it. Paddy Power.
A great crowd had gathered outside of the Knoll when a tricolour cartage arrived on the scene, and inside in that coffin lay a brave Irish soldier. 'Twas the mortal remains of the famous Dan Breen. Oh, the first shots were fired in his native Tipperary, near Soloheadbeg, where the grass it grows green, where they captured explosives from the British Crown forces. All Ireland was stunned at the deeds of Dan Breen, and one of his deeds was the rescue of Hogan, who was caught by the British going down a Borean when they boarded that train at Knocklong's railway station. All Ireland was proud of the deeds of Dan Breen. Round his own native county, where the fighting was fiercest, would his gallant comrades sure oft he was seen, with the famous Sean Tracy and the brave Denny Lacey. Sure we owe our freedom to the likes of Dan Breen, and now he is back amongst his friends in Tipperary, and he sleeps near the Knoll on that hillside so green, and no more will he feel the great tortures of warfare. May the Lord he have mercy on the soul of Dan Breen.
It's the village of Hollyford, a small little village situated in the heart of the hills of Tipperary. This is the village that Ned of the Hill passed through on many occasions after the siege of Limerick. This is the village with its police barracks that featured in a big way in the War of Independence during May of 1920. We are now looking at the police barracks, where on the night of the 10th and the early hours of the morning of the 11th of May, one of the fiercest barrack attacks in the south of Ireland took place. This attack was under the command of Ernie O'Malley, ably assisted by Sean Tracy, Seamus Robinson, and local Hollyford man Jim Gorman, who on that particular night showed to Ernie O'Malley and Tracy and the others of his ability as a fighter. O'Gorman was a man who had already fought with the Australian Army in the First World War, and his military training proved to be a major advantage. The barrack, as we're looking at it, has changed little other than the windows. The porch, as we're looking at now, provided a major advantage for the police because it allowed them to control the view to the straight ahead and to their left and right. It also had much smaller windows then and provided cover as well as the opportunity of viewing what was happening in front. The first ladder was used by Ernie O'Malley and Seamus Robinson to climb up onto the roof to smash the slates. The second ladder was used then to convey sods of turf steeped in petrol and also cans of petrol to pour in on the roof when the blaze had started. There's high ground immediately to the back of the barracks, and the road here leading to our left, where you can see first of all as you move along it a little white house there on the right. That was the road leading to the home of the Shanahans, the home of Phil Shanahan, who was then in Dublin, who was actually then a Sinn Féin TD in Dublin. The Shanahan household, which you will see later and a close-up view, it's not possible to see it now as it's in a valley in the Slieve Hills here, was actually the munitions factory for this attack, because it was in their house under Sean Tracy's supervision that the bombs and hand grenades used in this barrack attack was made and were actually ferried down this road during the attack. As we move up along that road further and up in the heart of the Slieve Hills, you will see among the trees a red shed. This was the Alice home where Sean Tracy, as a schoolboy, lived for a number of years. It was in this little village that he went to school. It was in this little village church that he received his first communion. And it was in this little village church, among the nationally minded people, that Tracy grew in up as a strong, patriotic young Irishman. Hollyford Barracks was attacked, as I said earlier, on the night of the 10th and the morning of the 11th of May. Because of the design of the barrack, which has a lean-to at the back, the police, when were able to retreat to this lean-to, and despite the best efforts of the volunteers, as daylight dawned, it was evident that it would not be possible to take the barracks. And in view of the threat of the garrison towns locally being able to supply reinforcements, Ernie O'Malley decided, under protest from the attackers, that they would have to withdraw. And withdraw they did, along those little roads, left and right, and through the hills. And they faded into the morning light to spend their hours amongst the people in those Slieve Hills. We have here with us Philip Shanahan, a grandnephew of Phil Shanahan TD, who was born actually here in, this is the Shanahan household. The photograph is a photograph of Phil Shanahan TD as an officer of the Irish Volunteers. Phil fought in the 1916 Rising in Dublin, actually fought in Boland's Mills. Indeed, he, more than anybody, signified the support of Sinn Féin in 1918 when he defeated Ireland's most popular man, the late Alfie Byrne, for a Dáil seat in that election. Phil was born here in Hollyford and was the friend of Michael Collins and all the other great leaders of the Irish movement and a member of the First Dáil Éireann. This is the Alice household in Lachnacrina, Hollyford, where Sean Tracy, as a child, came to reside with his mother and aunt after his father's death. From this house, Sean Tracy, during his schoolboy days, went to Hollyford. This is where, as a little boy, he grew up among the people of Hollyford in the heart of Slieve Hills, just across the way from where Phil Shanahan and the Shanahan family lived, near where Paddy Dwyer, who joined him in the Soloheadbeg ambush in January 1919, resided. Sean Tracy was known as a particularly bright pupil, and already we have spoken with John Ryan, who was a classmate of his, and who on occasions accompanied him up here after school. So this is where Sean Tracy first learned what living in rural Ireland was all about. The house has not changed at all. The Alice home is as it was then, 60, 70 years ago. Now we are looking at this beautiful scenic countryside just outside the Alice home here in Lachnacrina. We're looking right down at the village of Hollyford. And as we move slowly and gently across those rich green pasture land in the Hollyford area, we come along to the Shanahan household at File Macduff. This is a place where Phil Shanahan was born in the later years of the 19th century and left at the turn of the 20th century to go into business in Dublin. Phil was one of a family of 8 and became a most successful businessman in Dublin, and his licensed premises was the home of the leaders of the movement during the most troubled days of the War of Independence. Phil Shanahan was the friend of Michael Collins, of Sean Tracy and of Dan Breen. Phil Shanahan is known and remembered here in the hills of Hollyford, where he came back to be buried in the early 30s. And later on in this film, we'll be looking at the monument outside Hollyford Church erected to his memory. Wherever and whenever Tipperary men will speak of the fight for Irish freedom and the great characters and the people who gave freely to that cause, Phil Shanahan will be foremost in their memory. Because not alone did Phil Shanahan sacrifice all that he had in that fight, more than most others, he gave his hard life's workings to the cause. And when men asked, "What can we return you? What can we give you in return for your efforts?" he proudly said, "I've given my all to Ireland, and that is the way I wanted." And he refused material reward for his sacrifices and for what he gave in that war. Today, in this peaceful little valley of File Macduff, where his nephew and family live, Raymond Shanahan and his wife and family, they too indeed are rightly proud of their uncle's performance in that fight for Irish freedom, in his role as a politician, where he defeated the great Alfie Byrne of Dublin. And later on in this series we hope to be speaking with Tom Kelly of Golden, who managed Phil Shanahan's pub in Dublin. But most of all, the spirit of Phil Shanahan today pervades the peaceful valleys and hillsides of Hollyford that have changed little. The landscape has changed little, but the homes of the people of Hollyford and the modern home of the Shanahan family today is indeed the progress that Phil Shanahan, as a volunteer and as a public figure, would like to have to be around to see. I'm sure back in his native Hollyford today, if his spirit can look down upon it, he would be happy with the progress, with the Irish outlook of its people, and indeed with all that is happening and what will happen in Hollyford in the future. Phil Shanahan must be associated with it, because his role in Irish history as a Tipperary man and as an Irishman is one that will not be forgotten. This is the monument erected to Phil Shanahan in his native Hollyford. Beside the Phil Shanahan monument is a monument to another young Hollyford man, Jim Quirk, who sacrificed his life for Ireland. Both these monuments are maintained by the 3rd Tipperary Brigade Commemoration Committee. They were erected by the people of Hollyford and surrounding areas as their tribute to those two brave men. 92-year-old John Ryan of Rayfada. John is a man who was a boy at the turn of the century. He was a schoolmate of Sean Tracy's, and indeed saw many of the events that occurred in this area during the War of Independence. John, can you recall for me your early days in Hollyford School around the turn of the century?
I don't know what to say about that. Oh,
You'd have been in school with Sean Tracy.
yes, yes. I was.
You were telling us earlier there about going home from him and chatting. What kind of a pupil was he in school?
I was a good pupil. Very nice young lad altogether.
We'll say, was he involved much in games in those days, or?
Well, no, I wouldn't say he was.
Well, I'll tell you, John, we'll come back to your school days in a minute. You can tell us, you were telling us earlier of a famous incident in Hollyford on a Sunday morning in 1920.
Was that about the Black and Tan?
The Black and Tan,
yes.
yes.
Oh, they surrounded the chapel, all right. And some of the lads got away out at the back of the chapel. And then Denny Quinlan got shot. He was trying to escape away.
Well, was there a lot of excitement that morning?
So there was fair excitement. The one Black and Tan, he prodded a poor old man with a rifle, with a revolver, give him prod up under the ribs.
Yes.
His name was Tommy Burke.
Oh. Well, did you hear the shots being fired at the men?
Oh, I did. Yes, that's right. I did.
Well, what did you do actually on that morning, or where were you?
I was in the chapel, and we all came out around about afterwards and just kept quiet. Said, didn't pretend to notice them. If you was looking at them or pretending to any notice of them, they'd have a kind of a sit on you. They took away a couple of lads in on the lorry afterwards, like I suppose for protection or something like that.
So you came back home here?
I came home, yes.
You were living here at that time, were you?
I was living here at that time.
Well, another great Hollyford man, Phil Shanahan, who went to Dublin and was elected as Sinn Féin TD in 1918, beating the great Alfie Byrne.
Yes.
You knew Phil, did you?
I didn't know Phil, man, you know. He was gone away before my time that I knew him.
Yeah.
I knew his two brothers, Paddy and Phil. Oh, Phil Shannon was a cousin to the other Shannon that I knew.
Yes.
I see, yes, right.
But you knew Phil, did you know the Phil that was in Dublin, that was the TD?
I didn't know him at all. I didn't.
I see.
I knew his brother, so.
Yes. Well, you remember the time he died? And
I do indeed.
Mm. Now, during the War of Independence, I'm sure you saw other events occurring in this area around that time.
I did, of course. I really forget them things now.
Yes.
I can't recall at the moment.
Mm. Well, I'm sure you saw searches taking place with the army and the...
I did indeed. They surrounded the place here one Sunday, it was a week morning. Got around and they took us all down to Hollyford looking for, see could they find someone that they knew. There was an old, a peeler as we call him there at the time. His name was Subro. They took him around looking at the people to see could he find anyone that they wanted. So he didn't recognize anyone. Whether he knew or not, I don't know.
Oh, yes. Well, do you remember the night Hollyford Barracks was attacked?
I do, we got.
What are your memories of that? That was the night of the 10th of May and the morning of the 11th.
Of course, all of us that hadn't rifles were around cutting the roads, you see, where the military couldn't come in on top of them.
Yes.
That was our job.
And you were out actually that night?
Yes, I was, yes.
Can you recall where you were?
Well, over here about a mile over the road, I'd say.
Near the milestone?
Near the milestone, that's right.
And what was it, digging the road you were or cutting trees? Or?
Digging the road.
A trench.
A trench.
Well, you saw the Veery lights and how
Oh, it did, yes.
Well, do you remember any of the people, but you weren't close to the barracks afterwards, or to see any of the people involved, such as Seamus Robinson and Sean Tracy and Ernie O'Malley?
But of course there was Paddy Dwyer over here was in it. There was a brother of my own,
Yes.
Ned was his name. He was in the Guards afterwards. There was a good few of the lads around, you know.
Involved in
Yeah.
in the
The Jim Gorman, I suppose was.
Oh, Jim O'Gorman, yes.
Yeah.
He would have been.
Yeah.
Well, John, it has been nice talking to you indeed, and a man with great memories. Tell us, can you remember what was school like when you were a young fellow of 7 or 8 years of age?
It was, I should say it was much the same as it is now, of course. But the teachers were more rough than what they are now. They give it the cane fairly good.
Who were your teachers in those days in Hollyford?
Mr. Lama and the wife, Mrs.
Oh,
Lama.
yes. And had you a big number of pupils?
Well, I couldn't say now, but it could be, there was space, I'd say 60 or 70 anyhow.
And quite a number of those pupils became involved in the War of Independence.
They did, that's right. They did.
Well, John, it has been very nice talking to you. We want to thank you for your cooperation with us.
I'm sorry I couldn't give you more information.
No, you've been very good indeed.
Recall them at the moment.
I know. Very good, John. Well, thank you. You've given us a lot of what we were looking for.
Away from the Black and Tans, out on the Shannon. And they followed them out and brought him back and shot him on the bridge of Killaloo. And next day my poor father got resting. He was at a fair in Killaloo. He just saw the blood there. Poor fellas. God have mercy on him. And the night after, they left to go to Dublin, the Black and Tans. There was well, I can't recall how many lorries, but there could be up to 10. And we were living on the very side of the road as you go from Limerick to Nina. They called in for water from one of their lorries. And my brother went out with them. He was only a young lad. And they went down across the road to get the water. And my poor father was out doing something. I suppose about maybe 8 o'clock in the evening. Winter's evening, I think. And he came in, he looked around. The rest of us, there were 6 of us in. He looked around and said, "Where's Pat?" So we said where Pat was gone. So she went to see where he was gone. And there was one fellow sitting inside the door. I can even see him yet. He's just sat inside the door in a chair, made a bucket of water. No, we had no running water at that time, or you know what I mean. With a bucket of water inside the door, and he got a mug. And he kept drinking. He was bubbling over with whiskey, the poor fellow got rested. I suppose he did now. And he drank away for himself. But he went out anyway. They were more taken up about passion. The fellow that went with him had a flash lamp, like, you know, it was night time. And he showed him the way up, those steps up from the well where they got the water. So they never harmed us after that, to tell the truth. The kind of the lorries went off. But the report went out next day that our house was burned. And they saw all the lights up around Boha, you see. And they saw all the lights. They thought our house was burned. But they didn't. They never, to tell the truth, we were on the side of the road and they never as much as turned a hair on us. And all the time they were passing up and down every so often. So that was my recollection. Oh yes, I didn't tell you. There were ambushed going up Kildare or up near Dublin somewhere. And I think nearly all got killed.
That's right. Well, those are indeed very good and clear memories of that time. So,
I can remember that as well as yesterday.
Mrs. Ryan, down in Rayfada from Boher in North Tip, thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Miss Quirk, first of all, I want to thank you for agreeing to be interviewed. I'm going to ask you a few questions about your memories of the War of Independence here in Hollyford. You were telling me you remember the Black and Tans coming in here, arresting your father.
I do, yeah. Yeah, well, that's all. Now, they came at nightfall and they disrupted the house. They had all to get out of bed and so forth. And they weren't too bad, of course. I don't mind this part. They took everything they could find. You know, I mean, silver and spoons.
They took it out of the house?
Oh, they did. They went all over the house. And I don't know what their leader was. Anyway, if you ever heard of the Barringtons, he was killed with Miss Barrington. You don't know his name. Oh, it came in my mind now.
The leader of the Black and Tans?
The leader that brought these people into the house.
Yes.
He was some sort of a lieutenant, and he was eventually killed anyway. She was forbidden to be going with him, you know, and they both were killed.
Oh, I see. But do you remember a Sunday morning here in Hollyford when a man by the name of Quinlan was shot by the
Oh, I do.
auxiliaries?
I do. Just after Mass, we had a priest called Father Sampson here, and he came out, he had the Blessed Sacrament in his hand, and he was walking up and down. And this poor Quinlan was a foolish poor man. He got frightened, and he ran off across the hills, and they fired after him, and he got shot. That's all.
Well, you weren't questioned or arrested at any time yourself, or
Oh, no.
held
no.
up or blocked?
No,
them?
only the one turn, and we were always afraid of their next visit to us, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. They knew that the lads were coming and staying in the house. And although they were staying in the house, they were frightened because there's only a small back window up the stairs, you know, to get out if they could. So they didn't come so often.
Sean Tracy went to school here to Hollyford.
Oh, he did.
Did you know him? I
Well,
remember him as a student.
I know of him coming, and my elder sister, Kathleen Quirk, she'd be 89. She made her first communion with him in Kilcommon.
Oh, you went to Kilcommon in those days to make your first communion from Hollyford, yes.
Oh, his first communion. He made his first communion here in Hollyfoot. Confirmation, I'm thinking of.
Oh,
you were
yes.
right. He made his first Holy Communion, and Kathleen was in the class. I couldn't tell you how many more. My sister. She's a nun in England.
She's still alive?
She's still alive, and she's a memory like I don't know what. Oh, gifted.
Yes.
She could go back to any memory.
Any others of the people that were prominent in the War of Independence that you came across in those days? Did you know Dan Breen or...
Well, I knew I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I knew, you know, I mean, in the crowd. That's all, yeah.
Well, Miss Quirk, it's wonderful speaking with you. Indeed. And
you didn't get very much information from me
indeed,
because
yeah.
I'm awfully confused.
Yes. Well, the Black and Tans, were you, as a young girl, were you frightened of them?
How we were, always. Because, you know, you'd never know what they do.
Well, the RIC in Hollyford, before the trouble started, were they accepted by the community or...
Oh, they were nice, but then the Black and Tans came and joined them, you know, and that made all the difference when they took over with them. They were with them.
Yes. Did you know an RIC, there was an RIC man here, I think, Constable Sukru?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And can you recall any of the other members of the RIC, their names that were here at the time?
Well, I can't, I think.
Yes.
I know of him. And I think there was a Constable Clerk. You know,
yes.
A real, supposing, a guard, I call him now.
I know, yes.
Policeman.
Well, were there many RIC men here in Hollyford in those days?
Well, there'd be about 4, a sergeant and 4 men there, lived there. And
well, what was life like for young people in Hollyford in 1916 and 17 and 18? What was the social life like?
Oh, sure, quite simple and harmless. And the policemen were just one of the crowd themselves, you know, before it. So then they had to keep back from us. And that's the way.
Well, Miss Quirk, thank you again.
Yeah.
We're now with John Ryan of Loughisle. John is just 3 days from his 90th birthday on this last couple of days in April. John, we're asking you to recall for us your memories of events in the War of Independence in Kilcommon.
Well, all I know about the ambush that was right across there, that there was 4 of them killed and 1 wounded. It was the last Thursday in November in 1920. And about the time that the IBIGs brought 20 tons one night from Newport, and they landed above there in Knockfewn and put the Butler family out of the bed and brought down the meat and eggs and made them put down the fire and give the night cooking for them, and brought 12 prisoners with them, but there was no wanton man under 12. Stayed there till 10 o'clock the day after, and the IBs, you heard of him. He didn't live only 2 months longer. He was shot himself and Barton's daughter in Maru. They were out driving and they were ambushed.
What was his name again?
Viggs, D.I. Viggs.
D.I. Viggs.
Yeah. And they were shot outside Newport, and she had to be shot. She went to save him, to stand in, go between them. That was in April 1921.
Can you remember events in the aftermath of the ambush down here at Kilcommon Cross?
I do. I remember the day I was up here on the hill, although I lived back there. I wasn't living here at that time. I remember the day of the funeral. They tore the place, firing shots around. All around, up along that road now where the ambush was. It was there now where the first shots was fired. See the quarry?
Yes.
It was there the first shots was fired, down the road. They were coming up, 9 of them, and Sergeant, what is his name? He got in the door into Pat Ryan's, in the hall door and up the stairs, in under the bed.
He escaped?
He escaped.
He was the RIC sergeant, was he?
He was.
Stationed in Kilcommon?
He wasn't Huns. No, what's his name now? He was stationed in Kilcommon. Oh, he was a hard man. He got away free, though, all the time.
Yes, he escaped.
He escaped.
Well, was there an incident in the church in Kilcommon on a Sunday morning at that time?
Oh, yes, they were all taken to... I was there myself with myself and a couple of fellas. We got word that they were coming. And we went out the top of that hill, you know. And they took all the rest of the fellas to level the ditches overhead, after the ambush, overhead the barrack, all the fences. They gave them all day working of a Sunday.
So that they'd see people, they wouldn't have cover?
They wouldn't have no cover to get away from them.
I see. Well, in your young days here in the volunteer movement when it started, can you recall the start of it?
Around 1914, I believe, they started first. You know, drilling and marching. From that up in along 1915, 16, 17, and it never got anyway hot until 19, you know.
Yes.
It was all over nearly for a while after 1916.
Yes.
But then it started in Solohead. You remember?
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Well, who were the prominent men in the volunteers round this area of Kilcommon and Rare Cross?
The Capelesses and Pat Doherty and Willie Hanley. The Capelesses.
Yes.
You didn't know Jim, the criminal that was in Hollyford.
That's right, yes.
And Jack, and they were on their own, and Willie Hanley yonder in Risk, and the Dohertys, and then there were a lot of fellows around. They were the headmen of it all the time.
But the other people were in the movement, but they weren't on their own as such.
They weren't on their own.
Yes.
They were at home all their time.
Well, had you any
near, were you arrested or confronted by the Black and Tans at any time, or?
No, only just, I'll tell you, what's this they did now? No, I was never confronted by anyone, because I'll tell you, I was only just a layman going around with them and showing them where to go. So I brought them to ambush them all.
Yes.
They came to our house above where I lived up in the line, the Anglesey line, the night before, and the four of them, and they went back that night and they brought 23 men in the morning. They called me out of the bed. And we came along now there that way overhead the quarry, and they held the we went down overhead the barrack and was scared their lives. And we were to go back in, two of us, to bring them a dinner around 2 or 3 o'clock if the ambush didn't happen, but the ambush took place at 11.
Who were the prominent people in that ambush at Kilcommon?
Ned Larry of Beechwood. They were all North Tipperary men. Ned Larry of Beechwood, Paddy Lacken, the Bryans and the Wyans, Collisons and Moneygall was there, one of them, and one of the Harties of Clonalay was right to Mivara. And then the rest of them was nearly neighbours, back out here, Filduvan, Clonkaloo.
Oh, yes. Any of the upper church people in it?
Not one of them. No, not one of them. They were all North Tipperary.
Well, the attack on the barracks of Rare Cross, do you remember?
I do. We blocked the road that night back up here. A Saturday night, and sure it didn't come off at all.
Yes.
Just come off a Saturday night, even Patsy Murphy now. He brought Duffer Church fellas with a horse and sidecar. I met him on the road. It was Saturday evening, and the headman in Nana put it off. He hadn't word got in time. And then it came off the night after Sunday night.
Oh.
They burned the barracks sure that night, Sunday night. It was morning, sure it was 2 o'clock the day after when Duffer Church Wayne rode the saddle horses down the Reeska Road. Found that ambush.
Found the ambush.
Paddy Kinnan, Tom Gleeson, Jim Stapleton.
You knew Paddy Kinnan, Tom Gleeson and Jim Stapleton?
I did well. Was often in the church at meetings that time, you know.
Tom Gleeson actually only died a short time ago.
I know that. He lived in Gale.
That's right.
He
was
lived
a great character.
Tom Gleeson should be about 95.
That's right. That's right.
He was a great character and a great worker and had a great shorthand job.
Is that right?
So I heard.
Well, John, indeed you have many memories. Looking back over at that period of time, what would be your outstanding memory of the time, or the event you made the biggest impression with you?
That's what did I think of it?
Yes.
Well, I think they was on the right track.
Yes.
What did you say?
Oh, I agree with you, yes indeed. I agree with you. John, is there anything else you'd like to say to us?
No, I have a lot of memory lost.
Yes, and still you have a very clear memory, I can tell you, and you knew great men.
I did, I knew great men. Paddy Lacken was a great man.
Yes, indeed he was, Paddy.
Because he shot Viggs, you know.
Viggs, was it?
Was. He took the father as a hostage in the lorry and kept him out who he can torture him.
Yes.
An old man. Kept him a week in the lorries as a hostage going around the time of the tans. So he was dead on him to come at him, and he had him watched several times, but he got him in the latter end.
Yes. Well, John Ryan, it has been great speaking with you. Yeah. We hope you'll celebrate your 90th birthday and many more of them here in Loughisle.
Thanks.
This is the site of the famous Kilcommon ambush, where 4 members of the Crown forces were fatally wounded and 1 seriously wounded but survived. This was an ambush planned by the people of the North Tipperary Brigade Old IRA, but having the help of people from the Upper Church area. It was indeed one of the major ambushes in this part of the country during the War of Independence. And as you can see here, it occurred just at the turn of the road and almost beside the home of the former Bishop of Clonfert, the late Dr. Tom Ryan, who was born just down here in the residence behind the trees, which you may be able to catch a glimpse of. The ambush was a major event in the War of Independence. It was a very detailed ambush in which a lot of planning went into. And the engagement was a short and sharp one. The sergeant of the police involved made his escape into the Ryan household and ran upstairs and hid under a bed. Due to the threat of reinforcements coming, it was thought not wise by Paddy Ryan Lacken, who was in charge of this operation, to pursue him. As a matter of fact, speaking of Paddy Ryan Lacken, he was one of the people who played a most prominent part in this ambush, and it is reputed that he more than likely was the person who fired at least 2, if not more, of the fatal shots that killed the policemen. As you can see, the terrain around here was ideal for guerrilla warfare. The famous police barracks at Rare Cross, which was attacked by the Irish Republican Army on the night of the 11th and the morning of the 12th of July 1920. Standing across from us is Raymond Shanahan of Hollyford, standing in the exact position that the sergeant of the RIC stood as he left the barracks to try and dislodge the IRA attackers who were at that time on at the chimney smashing the roof. Just as he was about to fire on them, Paddy O'Dwyer of Hollyford, from behind where we are standing now, discharged rapid rifle fire, and the RIC sergeant was seen to fall. This was indeed one of the most intensive barrack attacks in the 3rd Tipperary Brigade area, because it was 3rd Tipperary Brigade people who were mostly involved here. Jim Gorman of Hollyford, Paddy Dwyer of Hollyford, Sean Tracy, Ernie O'Malley, all the leading figures in the War of Independence in South Tipperary were involved in this attack. It lasted for several hours. The IRA were somewhat hampered by the lack of rifles, but indeed, after a long and fierce battle, the roof took fire, and as you can see, there are new roof on this barracks. As the camera will show quickly, when you can gradually move along to the old part of the building, which was a shop then, you can see the difference in the quality of the slates. On the porch of this RIC barracks, as it was then, you can still see the bullet marks, the chippings from the bullets in the wall of the porch. Also, if you notice closely, the window, the observation windows on the porch, here at the left and the right of the porch, and also still remaining from those far-off days, the steel grid on the windows, on the bottom windows. Those steel grid, in those days, they had steel shutters inside the barrack window and barbed wire exactly where Raymond Shanahan is now walking. Just in front of the door, as we said earlier, the sergeant was mortally wounded, and this attack, which ended in the early hours of the morning of the 12th, was indeed a complete and full victory for the Irish Republican Army. The date also coincided with the anniversary of the Battle of the Boyne and famous events in the north of Ireland.